Let's get to the news. There's still no winner in the Pennsylvania Republican Senate primary this morning, with state officials confirming to NBC News there are nearly 9,000 votes left to count. But the effects
But Trump says it's over.
Yeah.
Trump is saying disregard all the Republican votes that haven't been counted yet. Throw them away.
He's saying, come on, Oz, be like me. Call it now. The effects of former President Trump's handling of this race and other primaries in the state could hurt his political capital in the future. NBC News reports, quote, exasperated Republicans in the state say the end result of promoting candidates with far-right views with such intensive media coverage could boomerang in ways that damage both the party and Trump's own chances should he run for president in 2024. You think? Mm-hmm. You think. Some state Republicans also told NBC they were upset with Trump's suggestion that his backed candidate, Dr. Mehmet Oz, just declare victory, calling it, quote, shocking for Trump to call for canceling Republican ballots.
That's shocking. He wants to cancel Democratic ballots and ballots from predominantly black areas in 2020, but they find it shocking, I guess, that he wants to cancel Republican ballots now, huh?
Interesting.
And shocking only if you haven't spent 5 minutes around Donald Trump. Meanwhile, we're just days away from Georgia's Republican gubernatorial primary, and former Senator David Perdue may have lost Donald Trump as his biggest supporter. 3 Republicans who've spoken to Trump tell NBC News the former president is disappointed in Perdue's lackluster campaign effort and will not be making any more personal appearances in Georgia on behalf of Perdue. This week, a Fox News poll had the incumbent, Governor Brian Kemp, holding a 32-point lead over Perdue. NBC's Vaughn Hilliard spoke to Perdue about those numbers yesterday.
Your campaign has gone off the TV airwaves. The former president has not come in for a final rally, and you are down by 30 percentage points in the polls. What's happened to your campaign?
Well, first of all, where'd you get the 30 points?
Fox News poll.
Right. Where'd they get it from?
Are you not down 30 points?
No, hell no, I'm not down 30 points. For anybody to come out and talk about 30 points, come back and remind me of that Tuesday. We might not win Tuesday, but I guarantee you we're not down 30 points.
All right, with us now, the author of those reports on Pennsylvania and the Georgia races, senior national political reporter for NBC News, Mark Caputo. You know, Mark, it's so interesting. I love the juxtaposition between Pennsylvania Republicans and that story, which some people may be skeptical of, and then going down to Georgia and talking to the Trump-endorsed candidate that's getting pounded. These Pennsylvania Republicans reading your story and hearing other things out of Pennsylvania, they're sounding a lot like Georgia Republicans did in 2020 after Trump cost them not only those 2 Senate seats, but also cost them the majority in the Senate. It seems that Republicans do not forget. They haven't forgotten in Georgia and have brushed him aside in a most dramatic way. And it looks like Pennsylvania may be next.
Yeah. You're hearing this not only in these states, but in a few other states. But Trump has just trained a lot of his fire in Georgia. And that's where you first started to hear this sort of weariness. And one of the things that struck us when we wrote this piece in Pennsylvania was that similar tone, that similar sense of weariness that Republicans have. You know, an interesting example of how all politics aren't just local, but they're also national. One of the Georgia Republicans we spoke to said, look, we just want Trump to kind of stay in his lane, just back off a bit. She's a chair of Jasper County's GOP. And she said that a lot of people in Georgia were upset that Trump endorsed Oz in Pennsylvania. And just kind of gives you an idea that conservatives are paying attention to these races, not only in their own states, but sort of nationwide. And again, there's just this little sense of frustration. I don't want to misrepresent that Trump is unpopular in the GOP. He's not. He's very popular. But again, you're just seeing a little bit of this sort of internal, like, oh, like, give us a little minute, let us make our own decisions and kind of discuss our own primaries without all of this outside pressure and heat.
Yeah, but you know, though, Willie, every time a Trump candidate wins, I think the media makes such a huge deal about it. He picked a crazy governor, gubernatorial candidate in Pennsylvania that was on his way to winning anyway, which is why Trump jumped on the bandwagon there. But let's just go back very quickly. In Alabama, he selected Mo Brooks, a guy who was there on January 6th, a guy that was helping spread the lies about stolen elections. Mo Brooks didn't take off. The voters like, we don't care whether you like Mo Brooks or not. He's not our candidate. So his candidacy starts to fail. Trump abandons him. That's one loss. In Alabama, the state where he's supposedly the strongest, if you listen to him. Go to Georgia, a huge race for governor. Kemp was enemy number one for Donald Trump. We've got all of the clips saying that he might even vote for Stacey Abrams over Kemp because he thought Kemp was such a loser. Kemp is crushing former U.S. Senator David Perdue, who is very popular as a senator. There's another example of it. I'm going to go to Pennsylvania. Yeah, Oz is tied right now with McCormick. He trashed McCormick. He said Barnett wasn't ready to be a United States senator, and yet 2/3 of Republicans in Pennsylvania voted against Donald Trump. 2/3. And this is going down to the very end. Nebraska, we talked about how the governor there, the Ricketts operation, ran over Donald Trump, destroyed his candidate. And then you go to Idaho, the crazy lieutenant governor there, and I will say crazy lieutenant governor there that Donald Trump supported. What happened? She lost in Idaho, one of the reddest states in America. So again, I'm not saying Donald Trump doesn't have sway in the Republican Party, but I'll tell you what, it's nothing like it was in 2020. And I think the media needs to focus more on those massive losses instead of having the headlines about that his endorsement really means something significant, because I'm not so sure it does this year.
Well, let's be clear about Doug Mastriano, the Republican nominee for governor now in the state of Pennsylvania. Donald Trump endorsed him on Saturday, this past Saturday. So 4 days before Election Day. It's not like he propelled him to victory. Mastriano was going to win anyway. And Donald Trump hopped on the bandwagon the way he's hopping off the Perdue bandwagon when he sees it's not going his way. So you're right. It's a mixed bag. J.D. Vance, on the other hand, in Ohio, most people believe he won because Donald Trump came in and endorsed him and pushed him over the finish line. So it depends on the race. It depends on the state. And Mark Caputo, in the state of Pennsylvania, the GOP official that you quote says basically by asking Mehmet Oz to declare victory, Donald Trump is effectively canceling those 2/3 of the votes that Joe just talked about, Republican votes. Right. So what is the posture? I mean, again, it is different in every race in every state, but what is the posture broadly of these state parties toward Donald Trump as you look at Pennsylvania and you look at Georgia?
Well, if you look at Pennsylvania State Party, there is that person I quoted is Rob Gleason, a former chair of the party there. There is just a lot of kind of disappointment with him. There's a lot of soul searching and hand wringing, like, should we have gotten involved, the Pennsylvania Republican GOP is saying, and tried to coalesce behind another candidate than Mastriano, because they just don't believe, they don't believe that Mastriano could win in the general election. In Georgia, it's a different story. It's a very Trumpy chair of the GOP there, and there's been a bit of a Georgia civil war within the Republican Party and kind of within the Republican establishment ever since 2020, certainly since the 2020 elections. The chair there is just well known as just wanting to do whatever Trump wants to do, and Trump has endorsed and supported kind of an entire slate of statewide candidates in Georgia. Now, Trump is going to walk away as a winner from Georgia, or at least he'll fashion himself as one, because of Herschel Walker. He's expected to have a big blowout win for U.S. Senate there, football star. Trump recruited him to run for Senate in Georgia, and you're going to hear a lot about that out of Donald Trump's mouth, and you're not going to hear a lot about Perdue. In fact, there's one of the Trump advisors we spoke to said Donald Trump has done more to elect David Perdue than David Perdue. Trump apparently believes that Perdue's work ethic has been kind of shoddy. And some of the Republicans in other races, when we've discussed Perdue with them, one consultant had told me, look, the problem with Perdue is Perdue. He doesn't really like campaigning. He doesn't really like voters. He doesn't really like raising money and talking to donors. And he doesn't really like giving campaign speeches. That's kind of a problem if you're going to run a statewide campaign. And part of the result of what we're seeing in the polls so far with Kemp dominating him is just that fact that Perdue probably just wasn't the right candidate, or this just wasn't the right time to take on a Republican candidate like Governor Kemp in this year when he's running for re-election.